Chapter 1, here we go. Okay, so Chapter 1 is going to cover the major bulk of the reason why you're here today, and it's called King's Indian Attack. King's Indian Attack, unlike the King's Indian Defense, is a system, which means that regardless of what your opponent plays, your setup and game plan, the literal moves that you're going to play, are going to be exactly the same every time. Almost every time. Sometimes you will end up having to play like a little bit of an in-between move like this to like kick out the annoying bishop that comes up here. But for the most part, this is what you're going to play every single time. That is called King's Indian Attack. But obviously, just knowing that is not going to get you that far, per se. And this is why even Chapter 1 has a lot of different scenarios that you're going to face. But this first scenario, we're going to look at like the mainline stuff. We'll look at like two different variations of the main line, and we're going to learn how to handle each and every one of those. Alright, let's get into the board. Alright, so we have the board right here. Again, oh, actually, we need to establish this first. Okay. There are two different ways you can play the King's Indian Attack. The most common way to play the King's Indian Attack is the Zukertort opening. It's actually a Zukertort based opening. The whole King's Indian Attack starts on a Zukertort base, even though the central attack you're going to be launching is e4, but it's not an e4 opening. The reason why it's not an e4 opening is because the whole opening itself is actually a hyper-modern opening, and it doesn't have any of the rules that a normal e4 opening would follow. So it's actually a knight to f3 opening and not an e4 opening. But anyway, it says right opening. No, it's not right opening. No, this is called Zukertort opening. Just ignore that. The most common response that you're going to receive from this is this. D5. D5 is the most common response to knight to f3. Why is that important? Well, the obvious move that you play from here is g3. And if your opponent is not an idiot, he'll play this. c5. And you immediately play bishop to g2. And your opponent's only move is knight to c6. Actually, your opponent might play knight to f6, but your overall response is going to be the same. You castle. You castle. Against knight to c6, you castle, and then your opponent will likely play well, there are two openings you can play, but there are two openings he can play, sorry. E5 is one of them. And e5 is actually a more effective way to play against the King's Indian Attack. A lot of the traditional guys, they'll play e6, which looks fine. I mean, it has been played a lot of the time in King's Indian Attack, but it does block your bishop. So if you are to face the King's Indian Attack yourself, which you're going to learn in Chapter 6, by the way, Yes, you will learn this in chapter 6. This is not recommended, okay? But yeah, e5. E5 is the better way to play. And you respond with d3 against knight to f6 in castles. He'll usually have to play here, and then you again d3. And then if he knows what he's doing, then he'll definitely play e5, and then yeah, and then yeah, we're back to this, just like that. Same stuff here, same stuff here. Okay. Your only move from here is striking at the center right away. Some people will play knight bd2 first, but when your opponent's pawn is pushed up further like this, you can afford to get a little bit more aggressive like this. So that's what I recommend. And your opponent will very likely play bishop e7, very much like in the style of the King's Indian defense. But again, this is King's Indian attack. By the way, when you in chapter 6 you will come back to this because one of the scenarios you will face is when your opponent plays the King's Indian attack, and this exact stuff is what I'm going to recommend to you, and then you're going to play exactly like this, and then we're back to this. So this is why you're going to learn the King's Indian attack and the King's Indian defense, because even in chapter 1, you're going to learn how to play White's perspective of King's Indian attack and no King's Indian defense, because like the way the material is the material just both sides of the material transpose to each other. And what a lot of the time happens is, like, when you try to play King's Indian attack, you'll see some of this in chapter 2, not chapter 2, sorry, scenario 2, sorry. When you see some of this unfold in scenario 2, you're going to notice that when you try to play King's Indian attack, it can sometimes end up require you to transpose into the King's Indian defense. So, and vice versa. So sometimes when you try to play King's Indian defense, you may have to transpose it into King's Indian attack, but now you're the one playing this stuff. You see here? So all four of these corners, they often transpose to one another. So this is why a lot of the stuff you learn in chapter 1 will also apply to chapter 6, and vice versa. But anyway, so from here, the most common move, very likely, what's the likely move what's the likely move you're gonna play? Probably here. Yeah, probably here. And then he'll kick your knight, and then you'll go like this, and then he'll castle. And then from here, the most recommendable move is to undevelop your knight like this. Why is that? Well, let's see. What's the likely move that your opponent is gonna play? Probably here. Yeah, probably here. From here, your next move that you're going to play from here, you're going to strike at the center again with f4. This literal structure is the backbone of King's Indian attack. And again, even though King's Indian attack is a system, the way this version of King's Indian attack, this is King's Indian attack proper, basically. And this is why when you play this version of King's Indian attack, you basically have to play like King's Indian defense. So you get to see a lot of what you're going to learn in Chapter 6 ahead of time like this. Yeah, there you go. And what's the most popular move from here? Oh, can we see that? No. Is there an explorer that we can? Is there an explorer that we can see from here? Is there an explorer that we can? Oh, come on. No, we don't need to edit the position. No, we don't need to. Oh, is this one? No. No. Anyway, let's see what else is. I'm just going to give you like the major, not major, the whole gist of what you're trying to play here. Okay. Against this, your whole idea at this point is that you're going to attack using a pawn storm through here, and your opponent will establish a pawn storm through here. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to defend from the queen side while attacking from the king side. And your opponent will try to attack you from the queen side and attack and defend on the king side. And this works very much in similar veins of the French defense, the Sicilian defense, especially in the dragon. You'll see that, and you'll see this exact theme come up a lot. You'll see this in the dragon. You'll see this in the French defense. You'll see this a lot in like the King's Indian defense as well. In the King's Indian defense, black will attack from the king side, and you have to defend from the queen side. No, attack from the queen side and then defend your king side. And this type of battle line drawing is going to come up a lot. That's the major bulk of what you need to know. And then if you ever need to know anything else, oh gosh, worse. And if you ever need to know anything else, well, there are additional scenarios that you're going to learn from this. This is just like the intro, so we'll first look at the scenario 2. We'll first look at scenario 2 because that's like the most important scenario that you need to learn first, and that is going to cover what happens when your opponent tries to play the pierce. But we will come back to this in one of the future studies in chapter 1. Okay, have fun. Before we move on to scenario 2, I just figured I should give you a heads up as to what this game could have been if we actually tried to continue this. I ran the simulations and it ended up being like this. So, for obvious reasons, we're playing King's Indian attack, but for some reason, we're just flat out playing defense here. We're just getting cooked. We're just hunkered down back at home, just defending, even though it's called King's Indian attack, which is super ironic. And the reason why the game continued like this is because the only other way this game could have continued was rook takes and then bishop takes. And from there, what it could have been is, yeah, it's a draw. It's a drawn endgame, but if we really continue like this, here, let's just see what it could have been here. This is how the game would have gone if, yeah, it's just, there you go. We're seeing some, you can clearly see it's an opposite color bishop endgame. I mean, bishop endgames are pretty essential in chess if you know how to play it, but yeah, this one's just drawn. There's no real point continuing to play this, but like this one's just drawn. There's no real point continuing to play this, but I figured I might as well just keep showing this just to like to just in case people are still curious. But this game keeps going on and on and on for like who knows how long. Eventually, this should be a 50 move rule. Do you have to like keep... This is going to end up being the longest game of chess ever. I mean, there was a longest game of chess ever that lasted this many moves. And it was a King's Indian defense. So, it's no surprise that King's Indian attack can also end up leading to this drawish game. They'll call it 50 move rule eventually. They have to. Maybe not. Is it gonna happen? Is it gonna happen? How many moves has it been? Oh, is it finally happening? It's 50 move rule. It should be. Anyway, yeah. So, as you can tell, I mean, if your opponent doesn't know the proper moves, this is the case with just about any opening. If your opponent doesn't know the proper theory moves, you should be able to win the entire like game. But it does depend on a lot of factors, especially like your especially in the middle game of the King's Indian attack. It does lead to, well, just about any middle game ends up being somewhat positional in some capacity, but it again, like this goes without saying, but like a lot of middle games do end up being a little positional, and you do have to be ready to squeeze out the advantage if you need to. This is one example where it does end up being a draw even if you try to play as aggressive as possible. And again, if you want to know what happened in the simulation, yeah, it did end up being a draw. And it should be a draw in this as well. It's either 3-4 repetition or just 50-move rule. But yeah, this is what happens with proper defense. What I did notice after that, if you're dying to know, this particular style, I drew inspiration from this from the Mar Plata attack in the King's Indian defense. I played the line the similar way. And it's minus 0.5, but it's pretty even, you'll do fine. But as it turns out, what the engine recommends is actually this. And the reason why the engine recommends this is knight takes d5, and then you have e takes d5, queen takes d5, and the position opens up. And then you have stuff like this. And then he has to go queen d6 to protect that pawn. And then you go queen e2 to form a battery like this. And his only tries f6. And then you go knight d2. And the game goes pretty live from here. It's a pretty normal game of chess, except instead of playing it like a King's Indian attack, you would play this as if you were playing the modern defense. But that is one of the ways you can tackle the King's Indian attack. And another thing another variation that I should cover while we're still here. This is a reverse variation of the King's Indian defense, but what happens if your opponent plays this? Well, if your opponent plays this, then what you can do is still do one of these. And then I'll play knight to f6, and then your move from here is to actually play knight bd2. You need to remember this move, because if it does devolve into a mass trade, you need to be ready. So when your opponent plays e5, you don't need to play knight bd2. But in this variation, you definitely need to play knight bd2. And then when your opponent plays that, I mean, his likely move is to just prepare the bishop here like this. e4 and then castles. There we go. Against that, your next move is rook e1. And then he'll play b5. So it's, again, very much in the veins of the bayonet's attack. You have two options when you play this. One of the variations that I would often play in this situation is to just push the pawn up. And then he would go knight d7. And then I'll go knight to f1. a5. Now I have to counter that with, no, it's not that one. h4. Remember, he's trying to attack you from the king side. no, queen side. And you're trying to attack from the king side. He's trying to attack you from the queen side. You're trying to attack from the king side. So your next move is obviously h4. And then he'll go a4. Nope, is that even the... Oh, right. It's plus the opening at that point. And then you have to stop it with a3. And then he'll go b4. Knight 1, h2. See, now you're trying to, like, move all your pieces to the king side. That's where you're going to be attacking. And then b takes a3, rook takes a3. Just like we talked about in the previous variation. c4. And then your next move is d takes c4 and then b... Yeah, you need to remember this move because it's the one brilliancy you're going to get in this entire game. You sacrifice your rook and then you take the bishop and then it goes into rook a5. Knight g4, which is right here. Now you get your knights into the game. D takes c4. Where is it? D takes c4. As you can see, you're down 2 points of material. You're down a rook, but that's only 2 points of material in the grand scheme of things. But that's only because you're up a bishop. But then, bishop b2. What's bishop b2? You need to attack here. At least in this variation, you're actually attacking the opposing king. So that's nice. Rook b5. Where's rook b5? Now he's trying to snatch your rook. But you just go here. And he has nowhere to go. Knight b6. Yep. Again, you need to remember this when your opponent's bishop is eyeing there, and then he pushes his pawn to do so. This is the one brilliancy you're going to get this whole game. Okay, so be on the lookout for that. Remember this exact position. And when that happens, you need to know, like, hey, you're supposed to sacrifice that rook. But from here, the game is still very live. And you're still trying to... Is minus 9, 3 point... what's the proper move here? What's the proper move here? Oh, he recommends that, the bot recommends that you just push d4 in this case. There is technically the Greinfeld. There is technically the reverse Greinfeld variation of the King's Indian attack, but I don't know. Maybe I should. Okay, what happens if we play the reverse Greinfeld? Let's see what happens. Actually, let's see what happens. Actually, e6, right? Let's see what happens if he... Because sometimes that's the better way to play the King's Indian attack. Sometimes, but we never know. Even in this version, you should be fine. I mean, even in this version, you should be fine. It's only minus 0.36. It's like it's still pretty even, you know. Like you still should be fine here. It's not like you're losing. But there's this reverse Grindfeld, and then the continuation from here. You're going to what happens here? Well, let's look at that. If you really, if you really like want to study this, I'll include this in the, I'll include all this in the overall PGN if you want to learn more about it. But if you insist, like here, you can have this if you want to learn about the reverse Grunfeld. This was played in the previous World Championships between Dingleran and Gukesh. So there's that. I think it ended up failing at the time, but it's worth a shot. You're still better if you play this, so there is that. And the game is still pretty live if you really want to learn more about it. You can just view this if you need to. And then this whole PGN is going to be available in the description, so you should be covered there. Alright, now in the next video we're going to cover scenario 2, where we're going to go over what happens when your opponent tries to play the pirates. Alright, have fun.